Hi, it's Martin Shervington, and today I am interviewing David Amaland, who is here with me currently. He's overseas from his usual location, and he's in Greece. So he can tell us about the weather in a little moment. And also Joshua Burke has joined us as well. So thanks for that, Joshua. We're going to open up to questions at the end, so we will be back with you. But David, you have brought out a book, or you've got a book just about to come out called Google Semantic Search.
That's right. Yeah.
This is why we wanted to get together. So welcome. Thanks for agreeing to do the interview.
Yeah,
and
thanks for having me.
Very welcome. I hope you'll say that at the end. But this is going to be fun. You and I have talked about this. I'm excited. This is going to be great. So before we kick off and start exploring semantics and Google and search, and also looking at how this applies as much to individuals, and it's quite a profound thing that we're going to talk about, as well as businesses.
Yeah.
Would you like to say a little bit about your background and the other books and the other work that you do?
Gosh, yeah. Long story. Let's cut it short. Okay. Started out in journalism way back when I trained as a chemical engineer. So no relation to what I do now, except in perhaps analytical thinking. I worked for a while for newspapers, and I worked for the European. There's a stringer going all over Europe, which is Bob Maxwell's newspaper empire. And then about in the early 90s, that sort of collapsed because the newspaper industry underwent a massive change. And because of that, I joined, I became from a poacher, became a gamekeeper. I joined the corporate world. I joined the John Lewis Partnership, working in communications. And essentially, I was part of the transition team that brought that company into the 21st century. And I saw a lot of the practicalities, which today I sort of preach about. I actually saw them work in a social business environment. At the same time, alongside all my corporate work, I was working in search and semantic and search engine optimization. I was active on the web since '89, basically through the NUJNet, and then sort of as it took off, then in '95 we had the web coming on. Before that was the internet, and I sort of grew with it, as it were.
Great. And the book, when's the book out?
Okay, in the UK, we get it first. Yep. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm British. But it's coming out on the 5th of July. And in the US, it's coming out on the 15th of July. So they get it 10 days later.
That is great. I've pre-ordered.
I'm so glad.
Great. Okay, so the title of the book is Google Semantic Search. So I think the starting point probably is to go for the middle word. We know what Google is. We probably know what search is to some extent.
Yes.
But let's now go for the middle one to kick us off. Semantics. What are they?
Semantics. Okay. Definition of semantics means meaning. It's an ancient Greek word. And if we look at search and how it has worked to date, or rather has worked up to the end of 2012, pretty much, it was Boolean Search. What is Boolean Search? Essentially, it's a textual analysis, a statistical analysis text tool. That's all it is. So if you look, for instance, for a page on the web called Martin Shervington, looking for your site, Google had no idea who you were. Didn't know if you're a person or a business or a brand or anything like that. But it would scan your website looking for a statistical analysis of the words Martin and Shervington, occurring in a certain order in the page, in a certain place on the page, being on the head title, being on the URL perhaps, and then it would statistically give us 10 links. And the order of confidence would be from number 1 to number 10, number 1 being the most confident, where you are most likely to find your website, and number 10, the least confident. And that's how it used to work, which is a very iffy proposition for two reasons. First of all, because statistical analysis is very mathematical driven, very analyzable, and can be gamed. And secondly, because the ultimate decider of the results was you, the human element. It was me and you. So basically, you got into the situation where you had to go click on link number 1. Does it fulfill your expectations? No. Click on link number 2. And if you got to page 2 and you didn't find what you wanted to, and very few people ever did get to page 2, then you would start the search again, which was very deplorable in many ways.
So in a way, I mean, in that system, which there's still an element of
Google, yeah.
It's still there.
Yes.
One of the things that we're talking about here is the first 10 results from not just 20 or 30, but potentially tens of thousands, millions, billions of results, isn't it? And we're all looking at that first page, which kind of seems a little bit. There's a lot of redundancy.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's how when we got used to that. And when you said, I mean, there's lots of things you just said I could pick up on. I'll pick up on one about gaming that.
Yes.
So that's been a very common thing. People look at search engine optimization, and they've regularly. I mean, I put a little joke out. A man walks into a bar, a pub, beer, wine, Moe, Bollinger, that kind of old thing, which is cram the keywords, get the density right, do the, and lots of tricks and lots of gaming.
That's right.
That industry at the moment, and I've seen some people who are very much working in that industry that are doing that work for companies, and it's that things are changing.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up that example, because essentially the way search works is it gives us an idea of the shape of the web. It lets us know what it is so we can use it. So because the search becomes our window into the web, it basically guides our thinking in terms of how we need to interact with it, and subsequently guides our behavior. So search can be gamed. Yes, it could, and it can. But the switch to semantic search becomes harder, although it's still mathematically driven, although it's still analyzable. And what is it? Why does it become harder? It's not that it's harder to game. You can still game it, but gaming something means that you gain something. So, for instance, if we go back to the search of old, by gaming it, I got my website to the first page of Google, let's say, a lot faster than yours because I knew all the tricks, and I gained a lot more from you. And if Google find out and burned me, it's no problem because I made a lot of money. Then I'm going to go and get another website and do it again. So it was gain for me, loss for Google, loss for the end user. Now with semantic search, I can still game it, but it takes me as long to game it as doing it properly. So there's no gain. I put in exactly the same amount of effort, pretty much, as I would if I was doing it the proper way. And if I get burned because I've broken the rules, I have a lot more to lose, because now changing your identity on the web, coming back with a new website, new social media profile, new social media connections, is essentially starting from scratch again. And you put in so much effort into developing a network that starting from scratch begins to become a lossy proposition. So you lose a lot more than you gain.
Right, now we've got right in the middle of it, but I want to come back a little bit because we were talking earlier, and I think that people would really benefit from us unpacking what's going on here. So when we're talking about social, we're talking primarily in this context, Google Plus, primarily.
Yes.
Aren't we? I mean, there are social signals with Twitter and there are social signals with Facebook and things, but you and I, because we spend a lot of time on Google Plus, we're focused on that, and Joshua as well. So what we're saying is that the social element within Google Plus is affecting search results, and we know that. We know that. But what you're saying is that you can't fake the social as easily, or game it, let's say, but fake can't be thrown away, and make yourself more relevant than what people say you are relevant. Because this is the key word, isn't it? This is what this is the one that I go back to my early training with stuff with Google is relevance.
Yes.
And so
it's relevance and context. You're absolutely right. I mean, these two things come together, two vectors. So essentially, if you think that every result in semantic search, in order to appear, has to be relevant to you and needs to be correct in the context that you're asking the question. And Google now has become very good at understanding both relevance and
Give
context.
me some examples. Let's draw down.
Well, okay, let's talk about pizza, for instance. Say you go on the web and you put in, I don't know, pizza restaurants, and you do this search at 9 o'clock in the morning. Okay, 9 o'clock in the morning, Google knows, and especially if you use your mobile phone, that you are basically looking for information rather than actual pizza restaurants to order pizza, because it's unlikely that you're going to need pizza at 9 in the morning. And it knows that because it knows your past search history, it knows your past search patterns, it knows where you normally do your search and where you're doing it now. So it knows all that, and it contextually creates a relevant result. You go now to the same search, and you do the search at 7 in the afternoon, 7 in the evening, and you say pizza restaurants. Well, it's going to give you the nearest pizza restaurants where you can order a pizza, because it knows that the most likely thing now is that you're starving hungry and you're looking for a pizza restaurant to eat at. So it gives you more practical results rather than informational results, because it makes that kind of assumption. And in order to do that, it pulls in signals from all over the web. It filters them through your own activities. It filters them through your own social connections. and it creates a very knowledgeable picture in order to give you a very knowledgeable answer. And that's the best way of actually sort of presenting it.
Now let's just say that I did want pizza at 9 o'clock or 10 or whatever.
Yes.
And let's say the first lot of results that come up are information, as you say, and it could be, it could be images of pizza, it could be whatever it might be. Will the algorithm, will Google learn that if I actually then go and click pizza restaurants and maybe even phone or bring up the number, will it take that information and start to learn my
So basically it's learning a lot. I mean, if we think of Google Now, for instance, Google Now is a fantastic concept. I can't wait for it to actually come to the UK and Europe. We've got it in the US. What does it do? It looks at everything which you do. It looks at very specific services and it preloads them for you with an extreme degree of accuracy. So basically it analyzes your profile, which is pretty scary. It's scary because we think we're pretty unique. And on the whole of our behavioral pattern, we're not. We're fairly predictable. And Google is very good through its algorithms of filtering this out, bringing the predictability factor, and basically preloading stuff which we need before we even know we need it. So you need, for instance, going from work, you need a road report, and it's there. It tells you already. You don't have to look for it. It gives you a weather report. It pre-checks you at an airport, when you're going on a trip. So it does all these things like an invisible assistant. And Google Now is very narrow in what it does, but it does it very well. Search will eventually, given sufficient time and data and the accumulation of relational extraction points, to use a technical term, will actually be as accurate in its predictions of what we do. So yes, to get back to your question, if you actually say, once I want pizza for breakfast, for instance, it'll think nothing of it and it'll say, yeah, great. But if you keep on doing it a few times, then it learns what you need. So yeah, then it'll give you different answers because they'll be relevant to you.
Okay, perfect. Let's go to Google Plus and that social element.
Okay.
What is going on in relation to, so semantic search essentially is meaning that can be taken from within a given context for the search results that come from meaning given in a given context. I'm sure I can say that.
The meaning arises. I mean, you're absolutely right in saying, okay, how can meaning arise out of this context? Okay, here's what it is. We think semantic search is intelligent because it gives us intelligent answers. But intelligence doesn't require thinking, funnily enough. Because, if we could say that you and I have all the knowledge of the world in our heads, all of it, and it just lies there, well, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't make us any smarter than we already are. Somebody has to go in our heads and, price the knowledge out. But if we have all the knowledge in the world in our heads, and we can actually connect it and draw the meaning from it, then we become smart because we can interpret it. And that's what semantic search does. By linking up data points and assessing the connections between them, assessing the relevance from each data point, it is actually able to extract meaning from the connections. So if you have enough data, you have enough data points, and you connect all those data points, then you understand what they are, and that's how you become smart. And you become smart all the time because it gets more and more data, and it refines it more and more. So that's what it is, essentially. So your initial intuitive sort of approach was quite right.
Okay, fantastic. Google Plus.
Central to it. Why?
So why?
Yes. Well, because essentially at the center of semantic search lies the ultimate filter, which is us, human activity. Google has time and again said that we're going from strings to things, from websites to people. What does that mean? Well, strings basically are the another term for the words which you use, keywords, which are turned into strings for an algorithm to actually check. But now we're going from those keywords, which had some sort of keyword density and had to occur in specific places on a page, we're going to things. So Google actually understands what they are. And websites to people, and because people become the filter. Google Plus is the ultimate filter. Why? Because first of all, it's completely transparent to Google, and secondly, it is a huge engagement-driven platform, and it allows us within it to create our own personal digital identity. Now, if you think about this, it sounds ridiculous because, okay, I'm not my Google Plus profile, and I would beg to differ, because essentially, if you meet a person offline, how do you find out who they are? You check out to see how they speak, their accent, the car they drive, the clothes they wear, where you met them. If you meet them in a seedy bar in a bad end of town, you can have a different idea about them than if you meet them in an upscale wine bar, for instance. So that context and the content around them allows you to formulate a picture of the identity, which then leads to, first of all, trust and an establishment of trust, and also an assessment of trust. Will you trust what they say? And then it also leads to a certain degree of reputation, because if you talked about them to somebody else, then the reputation, which comes from your own assessment of trust, precedes them, which enables trust to be created on a third party about them who doesn't know them directly. And that's how we operate offline. And now this is how we operate on an equivalent basis through content sharing, through the interactivity of our G+ profiles, through the links we share, through what we say, through the comments we do, and who we actually associate with online. And all these signals are small in their totality, individually, but in their totality, they form a more granular, more detailed picture of who we are than if we go offline, where we deal with sort of very basic things. So our digital identities are truer to us than our offline ones, arguably. And this is where Google Plus comes into its own, because essentially these digital identities begin to accrue, to accumulate a reputation score, if we can call it that, which will follow us across the web, and basically it will allow us to have impact outside Google, which is the semantic search world. So when you, for instance, approach a website which sells cars, and you're a renowned car salesman in Google Plus, and you put a comment on their website, or you share it with somebody else, then your vote of confidence in the veracity of that website is something Google sees. If you were a shoe salesman and you did the same thing, it wouldn't count as much, because you wouldn't be considered as much of an expert, or you wouldn't be considered as part of what you normally do. So it would be deprecated as signal. And this is a very gross approximation of what goes on. It's a lot more granular than that, but it gives you an idea of the importance of the human element in the semantic web, and the importance, the central role that Google Plus plays within that web.
And it's down to the relationships and then the connections that you end up with that really determines what information people will see.
Yes, well, in many ways, yes. I mean, I sort of we're in a almost space age in terms of the way we connect across the globe, across time zones. We have face-to-face video conferencing, but I sort of liken this very much to going back to a pre-industrial revolution time, when you got into the village square. In the village square, you didn't really need to go into a lot of trouble to introduce yourself. You interacted with people, you got a sense of who they were, you could see what they were doing, you established trust and relationships that way, and everybody knew. And if you wanted to find out something about somebody, or if you needed a service, even if you couldn't find it there and then, somebody within that village square knew where to direct you. And this is what we're actually getting to now in a digital age. And again, Google Plus is central to this. Our social network connections, the people we interact with, the people we meet, the people we actually share interests with, and the people we don't share interests with, they form our wider connections within the world. And we used to think of 6 degrees of separation, and it's down to basically 2 these days. The world is a lot smaller.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Okay, I've got a couple of questions. The first one is, what about the Google Plus culture? How do you think this plays a role in, you know where I'm going? I mean, what is going on here that is allowing all of this to happen? Because there seems to be quite a lot of social cohesion, quite a lot of goodwill, quite a lot of support, quite a lot of positive vibe. I mean, I noticed that when I turned up, it's like, wow, this is really cool. People are helping each other all the time.
It's really exciting. What happened was, one day we all plugged in and we decided to be better people. But no, what really happened? Okay, I'm very glad you brought this up, because essentially, yes, you're absolutely right. We behave a lot better within the Google Plus environment than we have ever behaved on the web. And the idea of the web used to be that it was a lawless place where anybody could be anything and anybody could do anything. And we have had a dramatic climate shift change here in Google Plus, where we feel that no, it doesn't. Anybody can't be anybody, and anybody can't do anything, and we all play along nicely with each other. And you think, okay, this is great. Why has it happened? Well, it has happened because there's a mechanism governing that, and the mechanism of that is basically based on something which is called relational exchange symmetry. And behind this term hides the very simple equation of loss and gain. Essentially, when you meet any person offline, the way you're going to treat them is going to be based on that initial assessment of them, which I mentioned before, which allows you to sort of calculate how much you'll gain, how much you lose in your relation with them. So, if you think that, you're the king of the world and they are going to be, less than a street sweeper, you can afford to be really bad at them because nothing bad is going to happen to you. And if anything, it's expected because it's part of your role as king of the world. You treat street sweepers with contempt. However, if you think that they could be the king of another kingdom, you tend to treat them with a lot more sort of deference, and you're a lot better in your relationship with them because you don't know who they are, and until you actually do, and you can establish that connection, that symmetry of power, the relationship has to be a lot more balanced. And this is how things work in the Google Plus environment. Because we put in so much time in our digital identities, because they become who we are, and we invest a lot of time, and they get a reputation score, burning them becomes a very lossy proposition. So essentially, whenever we connect with anybody, they have almost the same power as us in terms of they also have a digital identity. And there's no thing anymore where mine is so much bigger than yours that can afford to essentially ruin yours, because the moment I do that, it's a very public arena and there are going to be repercussions. You're going to lose followers, you're going to have people bad-mouthing you, perhaps you have people blocking you, you're going to find yourself getting to fewer and fewer interactions, and you actually rely on those interactions to build up your knowledge base, to widen your worldview, and also to create that identity which you so much want to create. So using algorithms within the Google Plus platform, Google has forced us to be better people, which I think is fantastic.
Let's go a little deeper then. How have they used an algorithm to encourage such behaviour?
Okay, let's take an example and sort of look at it in very broad strokes. Suppose you have a website which sells, I don't know, broomsticks, and you want a website to be the best website in the world, and you want to convince everybody that broomsticks, great. You don't want to use
There's a big market for witches out there.
Absolutely. Well,
you're wishing you could have chosen something else now.
But still. Anyway, so let's stick with broomsticks now because they're typical. So, you want essentially to sort of convince everybody that broomsticks are the coolest thing ever. Better than sliced bread.
It's the way to fly.
Yeah, how are you going to do this? Well, the only way to do this is essentially by creating a persona or creating an identity which is trusted, which has a certain reputation, which has a certain reputation score, which gets engagement going, which gets people talking about it. So when you put out, the latest broomstick to come out in the market is the Slick A900 version.
That's
carbon-free, low carbon emissions. So you have that, and people interact with you and connect with you. And I'm using very broad example here, but essentially you're using that to drive the notion that what you're doing in a commercial sense has validity and value. And if you didn't have that kind of persona, if you didn't build it up, you would be just a lone voice in the wilderness. You wouldn't get any kind of recognition, you wouldn't get any kind of benefits, you wouldn't get any kind of traffic to your website.
So talking in terms of Google Plus, what we're talking about is +one's comments, shares,
engagement.
Engagement. That's the attention that's been given to that content that you put out. That's what helps you. It's through the mechanisms that we're discussing. A general Google Plus.
And I'm very, very glad you mentioned the word content, because essentially we're in a content economy. We keep hearing that word and we think, okay, what is that? What is content economy? It doesn't have any value. We create something, but no, it does actually have value, because when you create something, essentially in that something you have invested thought, which essentially reflects who you are. You have invested effort, which is, again, reflects what you're trying to achieve. And you have invested a certain amount of your long-term aim, so your identity, in terms of where you're trying to go with it. And you use a piece of content to connect with other people, because you can't keep going around saying, hi, I'm David Amerland, hi, I'm David. You can't keep doing that all the time. It doesn't get you anywhere. But the moment you actually put a piece of content which becomes a central basis around conversation which goes on, around interactions, around the sharing, around the engagement, that also begins to become part of who you are, begins to become part of the identity. And yes, content is central to all this, which then leads back to people, which people drive content drives websites, and then the whole web basically begins to revolve around that.
And going back to search,
yes,
what we're talking about is that digital identity in relation to a particular context, broomsticks or...
Yes.
whatever
Yeah.
it might be, anything.
Yeah.
But that I then start to gain authority in
Yes.
that particular area, and other people are giving me that authority through their engagement and reinforcing that I'm the right person. So this then is influencing search results.
Yes. But this, I mean, this is a very subtle thing, because essentially, yes, people are giving you that authority, but at the same time, it's not a free ride, because they're giving you that authority because you give value back to them. So
Value in
if
the
you
content, value in the
value
interaction.
both value
But,
in the way
yeah.
that you filter the web for them, because you become basically the way that they see part of the web. So they get value from that, which is why they follow you. They get value in your views when you assess things, and they get value in the content which you share, because they feel that they gain something which they would otherwise have had to work a lot harder for. So essentially, if we take this as a king and his kingdom, you're very much a servant of your subjects, and they are very much tied into you. And if you're to sort of remove the king from the kingdom it's without a head and it's lost a big part of itself. If you're to remove the subjects from the king without subjects is not a king anymore. So this is again, it comes back to symmetry, which I explained before. And if we take this symmetry between, let's say, a power user in Google Plus who has 3 million users, 3 million followers, and his followers, that symmetry exists. And then if you take that symmetry between two different people, whether they're power users or not, again, that symmetry exists. So it forces this playing nice, where everybody tries to basically do the best thing and deliver value all the time and not be adversarial. And it creates a much better world.
The word that I would use is genius. Really.
Yes, I would agree.
Isn't it? It's absolute genius. And okay, so let's now go to businesses. Okay. How can businesses use this? What should they be doing? Because they are not necessarily an individual building their profile, but how should they look at it? And how should the members of staff that are working for that business approach it as well?
Okay, this is a compound question. So, and I'm also very glad you asked it, because essentially it's at the cusp of the changes and the challenges which we face today in businesses. I spent a very large part of my year traveling pretty much all over the globe, addressing those questions for conglomerates. They're multinationals, and they have huge problems because they are huge. They have different cultures, different languages. They have different language barrier issues within their organization. They have cultural barrier issues within their organization. And what's happening to them? Well, the target market, whatever the target market may be, is actually shifting. Why is it shifting? Because you and I, who are part of the target market, are social animals now. We basically get we get information through social media. We make different judgments when it comes to businesses because of social media. In the past, when we didn't have social media, we got all our information from where? From adverts, which told us we are big, we are slick, therefore we're professional. We have a $10 million campaign, therefore you can trust us, because we throw $10 million at this, we're not going to screw you over $10, which is what you're going to spend to buy it. So we don't have that anymore. We go through social media and we exchange opinions, we exchange views, and we then expect them to be the same in order to convince us. So just having a sleek $10 million campaign no longer convinces. And they know that. In order to do that, they need to talk to us as people. They need to show us they share our values. They need to show us that they have values we can share. They need to show us that the products they produce really meet our demands, rather than their products which they want to sell. And in order to do this, they need to engage us not through advertising, not through magazine adverts and television, but they need to engage us in a social media environment, because this is where we mostly get our information now, and this is where we mostly form our opinion of trust. And for a corporate business to do this, because it's not one person, as you say, it's a tremendous challenge, because they need to find their voice, first of all. They need to find trust within their own organization, so they trust that the person who's trusted to do that actually projects the right image. We keep on hearing about social media crisis one day after another with businesses. Why? Because they get on the web, and the first moment they meet anything adversarial, they react the way they have always done. They ignore it, or they delete it, or they put out a press release, or they become a faceless corporation saying, this is not the way we do things. And you think, I don't care how you do things. This is what I want. I gave you my $10, and now you're basically telling me to F off, and this is not the way to do it, and my 10 million followers now know it. So suddenly, I'm not a unit anymore which you can discount, because I've got all these people which are looking at it. And if they see you acting like a bully, they're going to vote with their feet, and they're going to go to your competitor. So these are the challenges which businesses have or face. And Google Plus in this can become the channel where essentially they find their voice. It's a channel where they create a kind of transparency which allows us as consumers to understand who they are, what they stand for, why we should do business with them, what's the emotional connection which we share. So these are all the things which are happening, and they're happening right now. I mean, essentially, it's a transitory time in history, if we can see it like that way, when the past 150 years of faceless corporation building and faceless organizations is come to an end, and now they need to become humanized.
It's a big leap, isn't it?
It's massive. In many ways, it's a leap of faith. And this is why, because essentially, if you're running any kind of business, the person running it at the top usually has their head still buried in the 20th century, because that's what they're used to. And the bigger the business, the bigger the leap of faith that has to be made. The heads of businesses right now think what happened in the last 20, 30 years, which is what they've come up with, and they're trying to apply it today. And the world today has moved a lot faster than they actually are able to appreciate. So people beneath them or people below them are trying to tell them, the world has shifted, and they don't speak the same language anymore. So, it causes a certain tension within organizations, which is not a bad thing, but it's a kind of thing which we see today when we say, how can they be so stupid? How can they say this? Well, they're not stupid. They're very clever people. But when you only react to the mindset which you have, you're always going to make mistakes because you're projecting the wrong image at the wrong time.
I've got a lot of questions. I've got one more we're going to ask.
Okay.
But why didn't this happen with Twitter? Why do you think Google Plus is the thing that's creating this change? Because this is a change of consciousness that's needed, really, for individuals and the cultural level of consciousness that then becomes within companies.
Absolutely. We used to think that social marketing was having a Facebook account or social marketing having a Twitter account, and it's not, because social marketing essentially is about relationships. And what Google were able to do, which nobody else has been able to do in the past, is actually link your social media network connection to the web at large. So we think of Google Plus as a social media network. It's not. It's essentially a set of tools which are given to you to socialize the web. So if we think the web essentially is search, and through search we understand our worldview of how the web is connected, well, that's what Google has actually done. So we think of the triptych, if you call it that, which is Google Plus, search in the middle, and the web behind it. And those three things come together. Okay. Nobody else has been able to do that.
That's perfect. Okay, Joshua, have you got a question for David? Or comments? Because Joshua, for those that don't know, is the ultimate geek on SEO and on PageRank on Google Plus, and he's written many articles, and you really want to check out if you're into it. He's really gone into a lot of detail. So, I mean, we've talked obviously, Joshua, and what David's talking about is a slightly different perspective to a standard social SEO perspective. Which is great, because he's looking, and there's a cultural element to it, and he's looking at the big picture companies and the broad. What are your thoughts on what he said?
Yes, it's very interesting, and it's a very different perspective than some of the things I've written recently. For example, the PageRank in Google Plus series, which was very much analyzing technical aspects and link distribution and things like that. What's interesting about this is the last thing that I wrote about the social media optimization for SEO and the future of search has a lot more to do with this, about the intelligence of search, getting more and more intelligent. And one thing I didn't write it, but I was thinking about at the time was, the blog Blind 5-Year-Old, where that name was used, Blind 5-Year-Old, because it was
this is AJ
Code.
It is, yes.
The idea being at the time that search was like a blind 5-year-old.
Yes.
Well, and that was a few years ago. Well, it's growing up already. It's already growing up, and guess what else? It's not blind anymore, because Google can now see images a lot, and it can see into images a lot. I mean, years ago they had a OCR, optical character recognition, which was, very primitive. But now it's starting to be able to recognize. So when they talk about facial recognition for images and stuff, that's just one aspect, faces, but they can actually start to see images a lot and understand what are the aspects and parts of those images. So that's another example of the increasing intelligence of the search, not just having the knowledge, but being able to understand what that knowledge is.
And that's
So
where the meaning comes from, isn't
the
it?
semantic search is very much advancing on that idea, with not just having all the words, but understanding what the general idea of it means. So it's very important from the SEO aspect, because a lot of our content that, say, we SEO professionals in the past have written has been, according to the past, necessarily overly simplistic. We had to stuff a lot of keywords in there for the search engines to find it. That's the way it was set up. I have all these old websites that I have to go back and just keep trashing the pages and dumping, because they sound so stupid, and it sounds like some of the things I've written is for little kids. And then back to the, you were, because the search engine was not very intelligent back then, but it's getting much more intelligent, and then the intelligence that it gets, of course, is compounded, so it learns a lot faster. And that's one of the things we see. Okay, when Panda came out and then Penguin came out, they're like, people are like, oh, getting freaked out because they're starting to figure things out better,
Yes.
But then things started happening much faster, because each algorithm works on top of the algorithm and compounds that intelligence. So what we're going to see is search getting smarter and smarter all the time. And to myself, having been around seeing search for so many years, since the very beginning days of Google, Yahoo, Alta Vista, Lycos, all of those, I am surprised. I've never seen search getting so smart and intelligent as in just the last year, the last 2 years, and then the last year, and then the last 6 months.
The
And
data's
Google
building up,
Plus
isn't it?
is really
This is what's happening.
it's
The
really the
data's building up.
encompassing factor of all of this that's really going to bring it together.
Exactly.
The authorship
Yeah.
through Google Plus.
Thanks,
Joshua, you said so many things, and I'm very excited you said these things. First of all, if we start off with PageRank of Google Plus pages, which you actually mentioned, first of all, Joshua started the entire discussion on this, and got everybody looking at it.
Blame Joshua.
And you're absolutely right, because essentially the value which Google gives to specific pages we create here is almost the same as it gives in terms of analysis to our web page, and uses the same ranking and in terms of how it's set out. And then it uses the relational exchange amongst people to actually filter it. So you're absolutely right. And again, this is important because we're talking about how we go from mere metrics. Here's a beautiful page I've created on Google Plus. It ticks all the boxes in terms of on-page optimization. And then because it interacts with a profile, which interacts with other people, it begins to get a lot more value than just the page itself, which is, pretty much the whole conversation started because of the analysis which you carried out to begin with. You mentioned AJ Kohn and his blog, The 5-Year-Old. Now, funnily enough, when I went to my publisher writing the book, Google Semantic Search, they said, we need a peer review. We need somebody to actually look at what you're writing. And I suggested AJ Kohn, and I'm very glad he very kindly accepted. I'm very glad he did, because when I was writing it, I was immersed in academic research for about 10 months. And academic research always takes a a slightly wider view than the practicalities we face. So AJ Kohn was basically my guide, if you like. He kept me very grounded when I was writing it, because it's very easy sometimes to go into flights of fancy, where you project and extrapolate and you come out with something which is plausible, but not necessarily practical in our days. So yes, and AJ Kohn is hugely respected because he's one of those rare people who has a very good grasp of the theory of search, and he absolutely loves it, but he's also very practical because he does it on a practical level every day. And that is, it's a very unique synthesis, and I was very grateful for his presence in that. You said that search is getting smarter, and you ask yourself, how is it possible? Okay, we know that it's getting more refined because new algorithms come out and new filters are applied, but is it possible for it to get smarter? Well, it is, because in semantic search, results are cached. So if we go back to the example we looked at before with Martin, where he says, I want 9 o'clock in the morning, I want to eat a pizza. I don't want to find information about it. I actually want to go somewhere and get it. Okay, great. Now what happens is Google actually remembers that. It doesn't vanish. So next time he does a search, it's not going to go through the same criteria again, trying to ascertain, does he want information or does he want to actually eat a pizza at 9 o'clock in the morning? Because it remembers it, it appears to be learning a lot faster than at any other time before. And yes, that's a scary thing, because you mentioned web pages, which we used to create as SEOs in the past. And I used to work on a very practical basis for an SEO agency not too many years ago. And we used to create sort of content which said, what is it you sell? You're selling shoes. And you say, shoes to buy here, great shoes, etc., etc., etc. Shoes again, buy them here, best shoes in town. And that's it. You put it out there because it didn't matter. And now it's the other way around. You can create the best article in the world. If you just put it out there, if people don't read it, nobody reshares it, nobody interacts with it, Google isn't going to think it's very important. Even though it may be really brilliant, because essentially it uses us as a filter, it uses the social element, the social signals, and it thinks, okay, if it's such a great article, why didn't anybody react to it? Either it is not such a great article, or you're really bad at marketing. And if you're really bad at marketing, you can't be really good at business. And if you're not really good at business, the end user experience to your website is going to be bad. So we're not going to show you up in search anyway. So, it's this kind of thinking which is very human in the approach, which is essentially making the web such a different place. And all these changes which you see, which are dramatic in many ways, are down to that. And in all this, you think semantic search, Google+, they play a central role, and we're right in the middle of it.
David,
yes.
That is awesome.
Now, I have one example that you reminded me of. If you really want to see how the computers are getting more intelligent with understanding conversation and speech and putting together, look at the Translate, the Google Translate, and that is very interesting because just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, say I want to translate something, so I write in what I want to say, and then I feed it in. Okay, it comes back, and then I would run it back through the translation to see how it came out. Well, it doesn't understand itself. Okay, it wouldn't understand itself. But now, a few years later, and they set it up so that they would be learning. So every time people change something, okay, if it's in a language with characters or a language with just different words, well, it says, is this what you mean? Is this what you mean?
Yes, and learns from that. That's right.
Be learning.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? There's that online program. My kids just loved doing it for a while, where you would just type to it. You type questions, and then it gives you answers, and you just talk to it all the day, all the time, and the answers it's feeding back are actually, they came from other people. Right. And so it's actually learning from itself. So these translation programs are actually getting a lot better. Now, they still have a long ways to go, but within a few years, I think that's a very exciting part about also the web as a whole, how it's going to come together much more from all different languages.
Again, I'm very glad you mentioned that. I'll bring up 2 points just to buttress what you just said. If we take Google Voice Search, which is very accurate these days, just to train it, Google used 238 billion search queries from real users. So if we think of that kind of data real data, which was the beginning of it. This is the initial training, and then it constantly improves on that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And to get a sense of the scale of the problem, think that despite having that kind of data, this is step one. We have a long way to go before we get there. Now, the end result, however, is the same as big data issues, because essentially semantic search is a big data problem. It goes with volume, veracity, velocity, and variety. These are the 4 things it requires. The key to it is veracity. It's how you verify things. So ultimately, you'll be able to ask a question, whether it's desktop search or your phone search or your mobile device, or your Google Glass or the implant behind your eyes. You could ask the question and it would give you an answer, and you would trust that answer so implicitly that having answer as a business for you would be worth gold, because Google say yes. You go to, for instance, Joshua Berg's website and buy your broomstick because he sells the best broomsticks in the world. Okay, and people would do that because they would trust search. So the transition for Google is it's turning slowly from a search engine to a trust engine to a truth engine, and that's where we're going. It's going to get to the point where it gives you true answers.
Yes.
So last couple of minutes, let me just pull this now. So thanks, Joshua. Okay. Thanks, David. Let's now go to where's it going to be in a few years' time for individuals and for companies in relation to Google+.
Okay. Short answer, because this can take a long time. This is what you need to do. You need to basically be able to create tremendous transparency about who you are, what you do, and how you do it. And whether you're an individual or whether you're a business, those 3 things need to apply, because essentially you're the same thing. You're both a brand. You're both a digital identity. You both have
the 3 things again?
They're who you are, what you're doing, how you do it. These 3 things. And you should be able to project this so clearly that it leaves absolutely no doubt in the mind of the person who comes across, and therefore also in the mind of Google, who can essentially assess it and present you the way you want to be presented. And whether you're running a multinational conglomerate or whether you're an individual out on the web simply to create a website for yourself where you can blog in your spare time just because it's your hobby, the 3 requirements are the same. So this is what you have to do, and this is where it's going.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, thank you both. So thanks, Joshua, for your questions and your input. And David, that's been awesome. I think that there's probably another interview to be done. But what we've done, we've jumped between perspectives, levels of perspective in a way. We're talking business, which is one thing. This is how you get search engine results. We're talking about meaning, and there's this philosophical angle, and where is this going? And you and I are going, this is quite a profound thing that's going on here. This is a big shift in consciousness, the big shift in culture within Google+ that's reinforcing positive behaviors, and it feels different.
It does. I mean, if we think of how infrequent it is to actually find a flame war going on, and we used to think that the web was created for flame wars. If you didn't have one a minute, you thought something was wrong, and everybody behaves a lot better here, and you actually take a more tolerant view and a more thoughtful approach to other people's comments. And this, as you said, is behavioral modification in many ways, because it rubs off in your real life. You become a better person as a result of it.
Yeah. Oh, so I think I mentioned that in the pre-interview, but that's what we were saying. There is behavioural modification, and it's a good thing. It would seem to be a great thing. Yes. Well, thank you. I really wish you well with the book. So it's out very soon.
Thank you.
Google Semantic Search.
Yes.
Already a bestseller on Amazon. Not surprising.
It is, yes.
It is. It's a great writer, a brilliant mind, and really appreciate the time with you now.
Thank you.
And you and I will be connected a lot more in the future. We know that. So
absolutely.
That's great. Joshua, thank you as well, sir. And thanks to everyone for watching. And see you all soon.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Yeah.